The afternoon was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves as a light breeze passed through the trees. Jake enjoyed his evening walks, appreciating the stillness of nature. It was his way of unwinding, a peaceful moment away from the chaos of everyday life. He followed the familiar path through the park, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots the only sound accompanying him. Then, something strange caught his eye. Up ahead, a gathering of crows stood in the middle of the trail, their glossy black feathers shifting as they moved in small, deliberate motions. There were at least a dozen of them, all facing inward, forming a tight, circular formation. Their sharp caws rang through the air in a rhythmic, almost coordinated way, too focused, too intense to be random noise. Jake stopped in his tracks. He had seen plenty of crows before, usually in the trees, or flying overhead, but this was different. His first thought was that they had found something dead, a squirrel, maybe a rabbit. He had seen birds crowd around roadkill before, pecking and fighting over scraps. It was natural. But as he observed the scene, his stomach twisted. The crows weren't fighting. They weren't diving in, tearing at flesh, or flapping their wings in competition. Instead, they stood eerily still, shifting only slightly, their heads tilting in unnerving synchronization. Jake stepped forward cautiously. One of the crows let out a sharp caw and flapped its wings, as if warning him to stay back. His heart began to pound, but curiosity pushed him forward. His eyes darted between the birds, trying to make out what they had surrounded. Then, he saw it. A small patch of fur. Jake's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced. Was it alive? Another step. Now he could see it clearly. Lying in the middle of the circle was a tiny German Shepherd puppy. Jake froze. The pup was motionless, curled into a tight ball, its little body barely visible beneath the cluster of dark feathers. Its fur was matted with dirt, its ribs faintly visible beneath its thin coat. Its tiny chest rose and fell with shallow, unsteady breaths. The puppy was alive. But it was terrified. His first instinct was to shoo the crows away, to grab the puppy and check if it was injured. But something stopped him. The crows weren't attacking it. Jake had expected to see them pecking, clawing, maybe even signs of blood. But the pup was untouched. No scratches. No wounds. Instead, the crows moved protectively around it. They shifted their positions slightly, adjusting their stance, but never left its side. Some even seemed to nudge the puppy gently, their beaks tapping its fur, not in violence, but in concern. Jake hesitated. He had never seen birds behave like this before. Were they guarding it? He tried to make sense of the situation. Maybe the puppy had been abandoned, left here by someone cruel. Maybe the crows had simply gathered out of curiosity. But no. This was something else. He could feel it. The puppy let out a weak, whimpering sound. Jake's heart clenched. It was so small. So vulnerable. And so alone. He crouched down, moving slowly, testing the bird's reaction. The crows ruffled their feathers, shifting slightly, but did not leave. What were they waiting for? What were they trying to do? Jake swallowed, debating his next move. If he reached for the puppy, would they stop him? One crow, slightly larger than the others, let out a long, drawn-out caw, its beady black eyes locked onto Jake's. For a split second, he felt unwelcome. But then, as if sensing his hesitation, the crows suddenly went silent. The eerie stillness sent a chill down his spine. The puppy whimpered again. Jake took a deep breath. He had to do something. But the real question was, what exactly was he interrupting? Jake took a slow, measured breath. His heart pounded as he cautiously stepped forward, eyes locked onto the unnerving scene in front of him. He fully expected the crows to scatter, that's what birds always did when a human got too close. But they didn't. Instead, they reacted immediately. Their cawing turned louder, sharper, more frantic. Wings flapped aggressively, and a few of the birds even hopped forward, blocking his view of whatever lay at the center of their tight circle. The tension in the air was thick, electric, like the crackling silence before a thunderstorm. Jake hesitated. His instincts told him to back away. But then he saw it. A tiny, trembling body curled in the dirt. His stomach twisted. Fur. Jake took another step, his breath catching in his throat. His first thought was that it was already dead, some poor animal that had wandered too close to a murder of crows and hadn't stood a chance. But then, it moved. A German Shepherd puppy. Jake's pulse quickened as the realization hit him. The pup was alive, but just barely. Its fur was matted with dirt, small ribs faintly visible beneath its thin frame. It was curled in on itself, ears flattened, eyes squeezed shut, too weak to move. It let out a soft, pathetic whimper. And yet, the strangest part? The crows weren't attacking. Jake expected to see peck marks, wounds, missing fur, some sign of aggression. But there were none. The crows weren't tearing at the puppy or trying to feast. They were guarding it. Jake's brow furrowed as he watched one of the larger crows, its black feathers sleek and shimmering, step forward and nudge the puppy lightly with its beak. Not pecking. Nudging. Then another crow did the same. Jake's heart pounded. Were they checking on it? This didn't make sense. Crows were highly intelligent birds, but they weren't known for protecting other animals. They recognized human faces, they could solve puzzles, even remember those who had shown them kindness or harm. But this? This felt deliberate. Jake took another cautious step forward, expecting the crows to finally scatter. Instead, they reacted instantly. A chorus of caws erupted around him, their sharp voices echoing through the trees. Several birds flapped their wings wildly, making themselves look larger, more intimidating. Jake stopped in his tracks. They weren't leaving. If anything, it felt like they were warning him. His mind raced. The puppy needed help. That much was clear. But what about the crows? Why were they acting this way? He swallowed hard, lowering himself into a crouch. He moved slowly, careful not to make any sudden gestures that could startle the birds further. They watched him. Not a single crow looked away. Their small, beady black eyes tracked his every movement, heads tilting in eerie synchronization. Jake reached out. The crows froze. The silence that followed sent a chill down his spine. His fingertips brushed against the puppy's fur. It was cold, damp from the dirt. The tiny creature flinched slightly but didn't try to move away. It was too weak. Jake's heart clenched. How long had it been out here? He carefully slid his hands under the fragile body, gently lifting it off the ground. And then, the crows went completely silent. Jake stiffened. The shift was instant. The deafening caws, the frantic wing flaps, the restless shuffling, all of it stopped. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. Jake slowly rose to his feet, cradling the puppy against his chest. It barely weighed anything at all. He could feel its tiny heartbeat, faint, unsteady. He swallowed hard, unsure what to do next. Should he take it to a vet? Try to find its owner? It was too young to be a stray, and yet, there was no sign of its mother anywhere. Jake turned back to the crows. They were still. Not a single one had moved. They weren't squawking anymore, weren't flapping their wings or shifting nervously. They were just watching. Jake felt a chill crawl down his spine. These birds had surrounded this puppy, protected it, guarded it. But why? And from what? His fingers tightened around the small, fragile body in his arms. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. Had the crows been keeping the puppy safe? Or had they been waiting for something? The puppy trembled against Jake's chest, its small body barely registering as weight in his arms. It was filthy, its fur matted with dirt and dried mud. Its ribs were faintly visible beneath the thin coat, and its breathing was weak and shallow. This puppy had clearly been alone for a while. Jake's eyes darted around the wooded park, scanning for any sign of where it might have come from. A mother dog? Another puppy? A house nearby. A leash left behind? But there was nothing. The park stretched far into the trees, the walking trails winding through the wilderness. There were no houses close enough for a puppy to have simply wandered here. If it had an owner, surely they would be out searching. Wouldn't they? Jake felt his grip tighten slightly as he carefully ran his fingers over the pup's frail body, searching for a collar or any sign that it belonged to someone. Nothing. No tags. No markings. Just a tiny, trembling, completely alone puppy. His stomach twisted. Had someone just left it here? The idea made him sick. People dumped animals all the time, when they couldn't care for them, when they realized how much responsibility a puppy was, when they simply decided they didn't want them anymore. But who would do that in the middle of nowhere? And yet, the bigger question gnawed at him. How had it survived? A puppy this young, this weak, shouldn't have lasted a single night alone. Jake had lived in the area for years. He knew what roamed these woods: foxes, coyotes, hawks, owls. Any one of them could have snatched up a helpless, defenseless puppy. So why hadn't they? Jake swallowed hard and slowly turned his head toward the crows. They had settled into the trees now, their sleek black bodies lined up along the branches, watching him in complete silence. A shiver crawled down his spine. Had they protected it? That was ridiculous. Crows didn't protect other animals. They were scavengers, opportunists. If anything, they should have been picking the puppy apart. And yet, they hadn't. The puppy was alive. And somehow, it had been alone in the woods long enough to be starving, yet completely unharmed. Jake exhaled, shaking his head. He was overthinking this. Maybe the crows had been drawn to the puppy's whimpering, its small movements. Maybe they had just been curious. Or maybe... No. That was insane. He needed to get the puppy out of here. The crows didn't stop him. They simply watched as he turned and walked away. At home, Jake carefully set the puppy down on an old towel in the kitchen. It was still trembling, its tiny legs too weak to stand properly. "All right, buddy," he murmured. "Let's get you cleaned up." He filled a bowl with warm water and grabbed a soft cloth, gently wiping away the dirt and grime caked into the puppy's fur. The water in the bowl turned brown almost immediately. As the dirt washed away, Jake got a better look at the little thing. Its fur was a beautiful mix of black and tan, classic for a German shepherd. Its eyes were a deep shade of brown, though clouded slightly with exhaustion. Jake's chest ached. "How long were you out there, huh?" he whispered, scratching lightly behind the pup's damp ears. The puppy whimpered softly but didn't pull away. That was another thing, it wasn't feral. If it had been born in the wild, it would have fought against human touch. But this puppy... It was too tired to resist, yes, but there was also a strange sense of trust. Like it somehow knew Jake wasn't going to hurt it. After carefully drying the pup off, Jake grabbed an old shoebox, lining it with a warm blanket before setting the tiny body inside. It barely moved, curling into the soft fabric with a sigh. Jake smiled faintly. "Better?" The puppy didn't answer, obviously, but the way it relaxed slightly made him feel like it had understood. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten yet. More importantly, the puppy needed food. He didn't have dog food in the house, but he had some leftover chicken in the fridge. He shredded a small piece, careful not to add any seasoning, and set it on a plate beside the puppy. At first, there was no reaction. Then, after a few long seconds, the pup lifted its head, sniffed the air, and started eating. Jake exhaled in relief. That was a good sign. It was hungry, which meant it still had some strength left. As the puppy ate in small, slow bites, Jake sat back and pulled out his phone. He had to find out where this dog came from. He took a quick picture and posted it to a local lost and found pets group. Found this little guy alone in the woods near Oak Ridge Park. No collar, no tag. Does anyone recognize him? He added his contact information, then sat back and waited. An hour passed. then 2. Then 3. No one responded. Jake frowned, refreshing the post again. Nothing. If this puppy had an owner, wouldn't they be looking for it? Wouldn't someone have posted about a missing German Shepherd puppy? A strange unease settled over him. He glanced at the puppy, now curled up in the blanket, sound asleep. His gaze drifted to the window. Outside, perched along the fence, were 3 crows. Still watching. Jake swallowed hard. Had the crows saved this puppy's life? Or was there something else going on? Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had happened in those woods. It had been 2 days since he found the puppy, and still, no one had claimed it. No responses on the lost pet forums, no missing posters around town, nothing. It was as if the little thing had just appeared out of nowhere. And the crows? They hadn't left. Jake had noticed them perched along his fence, their dark silhouettes standing out against the early morning sky. Sometimes, they were in the trees behind his house, watching. They weren't cawing or making noise. They were just there. It felt like they were checking in. Jake wasn't the kind of person who believed in omens or superstitions, but something about this whole situation felt off. He needed answers. So, after making sure the puppy was curled up comfortably in its blanket, Jake sat down with his laptop and typed into the search bar. Do crows protect other animals? At first, the results weren't surprising: basic facts about crows, their intelligence, and their scavenging nature. But as he scrolled further, he started finding stories. And that's when things got weird. The more Jake read, the more fascinated and unsettled he became. Crows weren't just smart. They were geniuses. Scientists had studied them for years, proving they could solve puzzles, use tools, and even recognize human faces. If someone was kind to a crow, it could remember them for years and even bring them gifts, small shiny objects like bottle caps or bits of metal, as a sign of appreciation. But what really made Jake pause was how emotionally intelligent crows were. They weren't just problem solvers. They could form friendships, with humans, with other birds, even with completely different species. There were documented cases of crows protecting stray kittens, bringing them food, even leading them to safer areas. One article described a crow in Canada that had bonded with a small puppy, following it around and warning it whenever danger was near. The bird had even pecked at a man's head when he got too close to the pup, as if it was defending it. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Had these crows done the same thing? Had they seen the puppy as one of their own? Or had they simply recognized that it needed help? He thought back to what he had witnessed in the woods. The crows hadn't attacked the puppy. They hadn't pecked at it or tried to scavenge. Instead, they had stood around it, nudging it gently, watching over it like a flock would watch over one of their own. Jake sat back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just a coincidence. His curiosity grew stronger. He needed to see if other people had experienced anything similar. So, he searched again. Crows protecting lost animals. More stories popped up. A case in Australia where a crow guided a lost kitten to safety, leading it toward a house where it was later rescued. A story from Japan where a crow had been seen feeding a stray puppy, dropping small bits of food near it for days. In one bizarre case, a woman in Oregon reported that a crow had been babysitting a sick rabbit in her backyard, standing near it for hours until she finally took the rabbit inside. Jake rubbed his face, his mind spinning. How had he never heard of this before? He had always thought of crows as scavengers, creatures of survival, opportunists. But this was something else entirely. Jake kept reading. Scientists had long debated whether crows were capable of true empathy. While most animals acted based on instinct, crows seemed to understand suffering. Some research showed that crows mourn their dead. They gathered around fallen members of their group, calling out and even leaving small objects beside them, as if holding funerals. Other studies suggested that crows warned each other about danger and would even pass that knowledge down to younger generations. Jake's fingers hovered over his keyboard. Could the crows he had seen recognize that the puppy was vulnerable? Had they been protecting it from predators? Or, even crazier, had they somehow been waiting for someone to help? Jake shivered. The puppy shouldn't have survived alone in the woods. He knew that. It was too small, too weak. If not from hunger or the cold, then from the countless predators in the area. And yet, when he found it, it was completely untouched. Like something had been keeping it safe. He glanced toward the window. The crows were still there. Still watching. Jake swallowed hard. Had these crows actually formed a bond with the puppy? And if so, why? Weeks passed, and the puppy, now named Charlie, was no longer the frail, trembling creature Jake had found in the woods. With proper food, warmth, and rest, Charlie had begun to grow stronger. His once matted fur had turned soft and glossy, his ribs no longer visible beneath his coat. His eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, now shone with playful curiosity. At first, he had been too weak to do much besides sleep, but soon, Charlie's energy returned. He started following Jake from room to room, his little tail wagging happily whenever Jake spoke to him. He was still small, but he was gaining weight, getting healthier. And yet, something strange kept happening. The crows returned. Jake had noticed them perching on the trees near his house, watching from a distance. At first, he thought it was a coincidence, maybe they had always been around, and he just hadn't paid attention before. But the more he observed, the less random it seemed. The same crows that had surrounded Charlie in the woods were now lingering near the house. They didn't caw aggressively or try to scavenge for food. They simply watched. And the strangest part? Charlie noticed them too. The first time Jake let Charlie outside into the backyard, the puppy hesitated, sniffing the air before his eyes locked onto the crows in the trees. His ears perked up, and then, to Jake's surprise, his tail started wagging. Charlie let out a small, excited bark, bouncing on his paws like he had just seen an old friend. Jake frowned. The crows responded. A few of them flapped their wings lightly, and one let out a soft caw, almost like a greeting. Jake stood frozen, watching the exchange. Had Charlie recognized them? It was absurd. There was no way a puppy could remember a specific group of birds. And yet, the way Charlie reacted, it wasn't fear, it wasn't aggression. It was familiarity. And the crows? They weren't just sitting there idly. They were waiting. Days passed, and the pattern continued. Every morning, a small group of crows would arrive and perch in the trees surrounding the house. They never came too close, never acted hostile, but they were always there. Jake tried to convince himself it was a coincidence. Then, one afternoon, something happened that he couldn't explain. Jake had been outside, watching Charlie sniff around the yard, when one of the crows flew down. It landed a few feet away from Charlie, standing on the grass. Charlie perked up, his tail wagging faster. Jake tensed, ready to scare the bird off, but before he could move, the crow dropped something. A small piece of food. Jake blinked. Charlie sniffed it, hesitated, then looked up at the crow. The crow tilted its head, as if waiting for a response. Charlie let out a soft bark, then picked up the food and ate it. Jake's blood ran cold. The crow had fed him. As if it was still taking care of him. As if it hadn't stopped. Jake didn't move, barely able to process what he had just witnessed. This wasn't normal. This wasn't random. This was a friendship. Over the next few weeks, Jake watched as the bond between Charlie and the crows became undeniable. Whenever Charlie went outside, the crows were there. They never got too close, but they always watched over him. And Charlie? He greeted them every single time. Jake had never believed in things he couldn't explain, but now, he wasn't so sure. Maybe the crows had seen a helpless creature in the woods and decided to protect him. Maybe they had simply recognized that Charlie was alone and needed help. Or maybe some connections in nature were just meant to be. Jake smiled as he watched Charlie wag his tail at the crows, his once-lost puppy now strong and full of life. Some things, he realized, would never have answers. And maybe that was okay.